How does a ski trip to the French Alps plus a visit to Paris make it very, very clear to me that we need bipedal humanoid robots in the world, not wheeled ones? Well, let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. If you don't know, over the Christmas holidays, we went to Chamonix to go skiing in the French Alps. It was absolutely lovely until something happened. And then we went to Paris for a few days at the end of the trip, and then of course returned home. And while I'm talking here, so you don't have to look at my ugly face the entire time, I'm going to put up some video from the ski trip and also some pictures and video from Paris as well, so you can enjoy that as we're going. Anyway, for the first 3.5 days of our 4-day ski trip, everything went fantastic until Lane crossed tips and her ski didn't pop off and she blew out her right knee, which was very, very unfortunate. We then had to travel from Chamonix to Geneva, Switzerland to take a flight to Paris, and then we had to spend a couple of days in Paris. Lane managed to find a place that rented wheelchairs, but then the discovery process really began of just how important it is to have bipedal robots and not wheeled robots. So what became all too clear to me in misinformation was that cities, modern cities, even though they're designed to be, quote, wheelchair friendly, are not effectively very wheelchair friendly. For example, the Airbnb that we stayed at in Paris, even if we went down to the basement to get out, which was very, very awkward to do because you couldn't directly call it. But anyway, we figured out how to do that. But even that had a, quote, wheelchair accessible ramp on it had 2 steps up to the wheelchair accessible ramp. So you had to get out of the elevator, get out of the wheelchair, take 2 steps up, and then open a door on a ramp, which was very complicated, push up the ramp and out to the street, at which point you could go and start wheeling down the sidewalks. And Paris does have very nice sidewalks, but every street intersection, even though it has a wheelchair accessible ramp area, like a flattened area where there's not a big bump, well, most of them, not all of them. But anyway, even though most of them have that, on the ends of these is often they're sort of cobblestones and stuff, so it's not completely smooth. So there's a pretty significant bump between the street and the sidewalk levels on many of these interchanges. And yes, I'm showing you pictures of Lane posing in different places with her wheelchair and everything. Of course, the part that you don't see is the part where I was pushing hard up hills and, worrying about going down hills without good brakes and trying to get over these bumps and things like that. Because of course, it's not very easy to video while you got both hands occupied and you're working on things. So anyway, the parts that you're seeing are the parts that were the easy parts. The complicated parts were the fact that it's very difficult to get over curbs, and a lot of places, even though they're officially wheelchair accessible, still had some stairs involved. And quite frankly, I don't want to blame Paris for this because of course this is true for pretty much every city. And even true of our house, when we got home, we realized that our garage has one very large step up into the house and our front door has 3 smaller steps. So of course, Lane and I had to figure out which one we wanted to do. We decided on the 3 smaller steps, but it means that she's relatively trapped at home because it's not easy for her to get out. She can't drive because it's her right knee that got blown out. And by the way, if we were a year into the future and fully autonomous unsupervised driving was actually allowed, I think she would actually be able to get out. So that's something to say about mobility as well, is that even though I'm going to talk about humanoid robots and the need for them to have legs, it is still incredibly valuable to have 4-wheeled robots like cars be able to drive you around as well. Now, as a quick sidebar, I want to say that of course this is a temporary situation for misinformation. She'll get rehab and or potentially surgery. She's going to the orthopedic surgeon tomorrow to have a full examination done and figure out what happens. We don't know yet what's going to happen, but this is temporary. But for many people in the world, this is a permanent situation, right? Either through injury or birth or whatever. People are in situations where they have to be in wheelchairs all the time. And it is exceptionally difficult, even in the modern world that is supposed to be much easier for people who are in wheelchairs to get around. It is still really, really difficult. And by the way, I'm old enough. I'm turning 60 on January 29th. And please, I would love it if you would subscribe to the channel before then. I would love to make 100,000 subscribers by my 60th birthday. It would be quite the birthday present. So thank you in advance. But anyway, I've been around long enough that when I was a child, I remember they're just, if you were in a wheelchair, you were just out of luck. They didn't have wheelchair ramps. They didn't have accessible areas at the curbs at intersections to cross easily. So it was incredibly complicated to get around in a wheelchair, and things have definitely gotten better, but they're not, completely perfect, as was very, very evident while we were moving around in Paris. It was quite complicated. Now, on the other hand, Parisians were generally very friendly towards us and very helpful. And I know that's a bit of a shocker given their reputation, but really, I think Parisians are generally more friendly than people give them credit. Maybe it's the fact that I speak a little bit of French, so they tend to be nicer to me. I don't know. But anyway, I find them nicer than they have a reputation for being, but also making lemonade out of the these lemons that we were dealt, we found out that we were able to get into Notre Dame, which was just reopening. Absolutely gorgeous, by the way. We saw it just before the fire back in 2018, and it was beautiful then, but now it maintained the same original structure and everything like that. It looked the same, but it looked like it had been cleaned up. So anyway, it's a really lovely renovation, and we were very ecstatic to be able to get in, but we were also able to just go straight to the front. We went to Centre Georges Pompidou, which is a modern art museum, just got right in, didn't have to pay for any of that kind of stuff. There were several places we were able to get in because of the fact that she was in a wheelchair, so the Parisians were really nice about that. So I have to give them credit for that, but the city itself was complicated to get around. At times it was quite the challenge. Of course, we did take Ubers for any kind of long distances and stuff, but hills are unfriendly to wheelchairs, both going up and down, because down is kind of scary. And also every single street that we had to cross was its own little adventure. So the upshot of all of this is, as I was wheeling lane around Paris, I was thinking constantly about bipedal robots. Just that's where my brain goes. It really hit home how important it is for these robots to have legs and be approximately human size, and to have fingers that are relatively the same size as humans as well. In other words, they need to look like us in order to function properly in the world. Now, I know there are amazing demonstrations of like the Unitree robotic dog that can do crazy tricks and go up and down stairs and go up and down ramps and do all of these crazy cool stunts, but the problem is it doesn't have hands. So while it's a really interesting technology demonstration and shows what you really can do with wheels if you use them correctly, the problem is that they're not particularly useful as robots to do something. They can't manipulate objects. They can't, pick up a cup and move it around, or pick up a pen, or pick up a tool and screw two pieces of wood together, or whatever. They just can't do something like that because they don't have hands. So while a number of detractors talk about how unnecessary it is to have a humanoid form factor, in other words, you could have wheels on these robots and they could get around a factory and do whatever you need, or they could just be on a stand. They could basically just be blocked in and only have an upper body and move around. For limited case uses, yes, that could potentially be useful. But even in those situations, if they want to move from floor to floor or something like that, it's going to be more of a challenge, right? They're going to have to find an elevator rather than being able to walk upstairs, which of course will increase the time. And believe me, we had to wait a long time for some of the elevators at the airports and in Paris and everything. So you have to, budget in extra amount of time to do something like that. There could also be, even in factories that have relatively flat floors, there could be areas where there's bumps, or there's wires, or there's things that you have to step over. There's dangerous areas, stuff like that. So even in a relatively restricted factory type environment, having a bipedal robot is going to make them able to do most jobs that humans can do, whereas either stationary robots, obviously, that are just torsos and up, are only going to be able to do a limited amount of things because they're just stuck where they are. But even wheeled robots are going to have a limited capacity in this sort of situation. And beyond that, if they're kind of more like sitting height, where they're only like 1 meter above the ground, that's going to limit the amount of usability that they have as well. As they approach 2 meters, like 170 centimeters plus or something, then they become more like average human size, and they can reach things that average humans can reach and all of that kind of stuff. So again, the closer they are to the average human being, the closer in the form factor, the closer their feet work, the closer their hands work to an average human, the better they are going to be at even doing restricted things like working in factories. And then, of course, if you want to put them out in the wild to actually help around the home, to fold laundry or mow the lawn, or, walk your dog, or go to the grocery store and pick up groceries for you and things. And by the way, that would be awesome right now, because again, since Misinformation can't drive, I'm having to do all of that kind of stuff. And I'm working very hard on some other projects at the same time, which hopefully I will be able to tell you about within a week or two. That would be awesome. I can't wait to share this information with you, because I think you'll be excited about it as well. But anyway, can't talk about that right now, but very, very busy. And so, it's that kind of a thing where having a humanoid robot that could go out and do your shopping for you, even something basic like that, would be a huge time saver. Now, of course, up until very, very recently, within the last couple of years, the brain power and the neural network architecture, so both the compute hardware and software, didn't really exist to be able to create fully functional bipedal robots, which of course is why wheeled robots and stationary robots and things were instantiated, because people were like, well, this is a simpler problem to solve. If we don't have to worry about balance problems because we can put it on wheels or put it on 4 legs, that makes life a lot easier. But that caveat has pretty much been wiped out at this point by advanced advances in hardware, in other words, the ability to compute very, very rapidly, and also, of course, advances in the software, in the neural networks and everything that control them so that you can control the entire body at once rather than having to focus on individual pieces of the body like you used to have to. So bipedal robots with basic human hands, either grippers or multi-finger hands, those are within reach now, and they're going to be much, much more effective than any other form factor. So for any robotics companies that are looking at other form factors like wheels or 4 legs or a torso or something like that, I would highly recommend that you probably push that aside and really work on getting those legs working, getting the robot to walk around, because it is pretty critical to interacting in the real world, as Lane and I found out the hard way during our ski trip and our trip to Paris. All right, folks, so that's what I've got. Definitely let me know in the comments what you think about all of this. Again, I want to reiterate that this is just a temporary situation for both of us, but it makes us realize just how complicated and challenging it is for people who are permanently in this situation to get around in the world. So certainly the world can do a better job of helping people who are more or less immobile to get around in the world. That would be one very, very good thing. But the second takeaway from this is that the closer a bot is to a normally functioning human, in other words, 2 legs, 2 arms, more or less 2 meters tall, 1.5 to 2 meters tall in that normal human range. And of course, with arms with hands that either have grippers or even better multi-finger hands. The closer it is to a human form factor, the more easily it will integrate in with the world. All right, thanks again so much for watching. If you don't mind subscribing, it would be awesome because it will help me reach that 100,000 subscriber goal. And in the meantime, I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.